Check, check, check. 1, 2, 3. How do these glasses look up here? Jared, on this shot, can we make sure that we can get all three of them pretty nice? I would think I'd want the whole table. Is that going to be a problem with the TV?
Where are you going to stand when you're doing that?
I'll have to stand right over here to make it happen.
Okay. I'll do that with this camera.
Okay. Because I'll be dumping Skittles in here, so yeah. And at the very beginning, I'll be reading some stuff off, so I will be a little bit more over here. Because I'm starting off with sharing like stats about debt. It is awesome. Let's do this. Am I just going, or are we doing the video?
I don't have your video yet, so.
Oh, okay, then I'll just go. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Todd Lynch. I'm so excited that all of our locations and everybody online is in this conversation. We've been going through this series called Life Hacks, where our whole goal is to simplify life. Because if we're honest, we complicate it all the time. And so, the conversation today is going to be about money. I know. But hear me. I think we complicate money, complicate finances, just like any other area of our life. And if you don't believe me, I just want to simply read you some stats about debt. And just let these sink in. Now, this is American culture, okay? So, hear this. In American culture, the total amount of debt is $13.15 trillion. I said trillion with a T. Yes, trillion dollars. The average household debt in America is $133,568. Credit card debt is $15,983. Mortgages, $178,037. Auto loans, $27,755, and student loans, $47,047. You do the math on that, and here's what it sums up. As Americans, we have a lot of debt. Now, hear me, there's a few things I recognize, and I think we all recognize. Some debt is necessary. To be able to own a home, to go through college, to pay for those things, that debt is necessary. So not all debt is terrible, but it seems like we keep accumulating debt. Whether it's through credit cards, cars, phones, whatever the case may be, our debt seems to be able to just keep growing. And it speaks to this almost idea that it seems like we think as Americans, although you may not be able to afford it, use and leverage debt to get kind of what you want, because as Americans, we want things now. We want it right now. And so you kind of see this mentality that's kind of going on to where most of us go through life having a lot of debt. I've met people who go through bankruptcy. There's just this reality that we just accept it. It's just a normal thing now. And so finances then become complicated. With all the debt that we have, all the things that just trying to make ends meet, everything, it gets more complicated with that. But here's the crazy part. We have just succumbed to the idea that this is just normal. This is how culture works, and it's acceptable. And I wonder, what if there's another way? What if this is not what God really wanted for us, or there was a completely different design? Jesus spoke to this. Look at this verse. Here's the lesson. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. Then, when your possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. If you are faithful in the little things, you will be faithful in large ones. But if you are dishonest in the little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. And if you are trustworthy about worldly wealth, or untrustworthy about worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches of heaven? And if you are not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with things of your own? So Jesus kind of like gets right at it in this conversation, because he has just shared a parable about how money and heaven and how all these things kind of play out, because you see some connections here. There's some things that Jesus is pointing out, and I want us to understand, for us to fully understand the context of what Jesus is teaching, we've also got to understand what Jesus understood, because he's teaching out of this. So as we reference this passage, here's the one thing you've got to understand that Jesus knew: that God owns everything. He owns it all. And you may go, how does Jesus know that? Well, Jesus was there when his Father was putting all of creation together. He was there. He was part of it. He saw it all. So you think about, if God owns everything, that means all that we get is from God. Now, if you choose to believe in Jesus and believe in God, recognize we own this. We have to walk this out. Because our house, our cars, our phones, anything that we think we own, it's not the fact that we own it. God gave it to us. Because everything in the world is God's. Look at this passage in Psalms 24. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. The world and all its people belong to him. For he laid the earth's foundation on the sea and built it on the ocean depths. Speaking to this truth that God owns it all. Now, some of you, if you're like me, you may be like, but I worked for that phone. I worked for that car. It's my name on the house. Recognize this, and I get that. But who gave you the ability to work? Who gave you this earth to live in? See, all those factors play into you being able to own anything. And so what God does is he goes, I've created all this. I know how it functions. I know how it works. And here's the deal. I want you to be good stewards of this. And you think about this, how we steward our money. You can go back to that passage that Jesus was talking about. It has implications for heaven. God is looking how we do what we do with our finances. If we are trustworthy with our finances, then there's this implication we'll be trustworthy with things up in heaven. So God is kind of seeing this as like, hey, as I give you things, as you steward money, resources, whatever I've given you, there is a relationship that is being built. Because God is looking at us and we are looking at God and going, can we trust each other in this relationship? Because we have the owner of it all saying, here, I've given you this, and I want you to lead it well. So there's another insight that you got to understand. So the first one is God owns everything. The second one is this: every financial decision is a spiritual decision. And maybe going, really, all of it? So when I bought a piece of gum today, like that's a spiritual decision? Well, think of it this way. Any business owner will want to know how its business is doing. And anytime there are decisions that affect the business, the owner is going to be in those decisions. Correct? Yeah. So, if God owns everything, but he gives us the ability to steward it and to have these things, and he goes, I want you to lead it well, then he wants to be involved in the financial decisions that we're making. And so now I think you can begin to see there might be this tension that goes on. Because culture tells us one thing, Culture tells, hey, use debt. Do what you need to experience what you want to experience so that you can experience happiness, experience joy, have the things now. I mean, if you look at commercials, you look at advertising, that's what it's pushing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but that is what culture is telling us. But then you have God on this other side, teaching us a whole different perspective because culture kind of goes more, we own it. God is telling us, no, I own it. I just want you to steward it well. And so then Jesus said something that I think now makes a little bit more sense. No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. He's pointing out, see, there's these two kind of ideas about money. Either you kind of focus on what culture says or what you believe about money, and it's mine, and I earned it, so I get to spend it how I want, or you believe that God is the master, and everything he has, everything he owns, that's the world, it's everything, and I simply get to steward it. So you've got to wrestle with, what do you believe in this? And here's to me the danger about the culture piece. Because what happens is the reason we have debt or the reason we chase after things is because we think it's a need. It's very tempting. I know I've experienced it. I have a certain car and it starts to break down or it starts to fall apart, and there's this thought in the back of my head, I'm going, okay, I could fix it, spend the money on it, or I can just go buy a new one. And I know the payments will be outrageous, but at least it will function and I won't have to deal with this. And if you keep that going, you will eventually turn that into a need where you think, this new car, I just need it now. You know, I've got to get to work, I got to do this, I got to do that. And it becomes a need, when in reality, it's not necessarily true. And so here's kind of what begins to happen. Greed becomes masked as a need. Now, most of you may be like, oh, I'm not like that. Well, here, let me give you just a few examples that I kind of thought of that I've done myself, okay? I need those shoes, although it will require me to pull it out of my savings. I need this new car for work, and although I can't afford it, I'll just put it on the credit card. My family needs this vacation, and we'll just pay it off later. My kids need this private school, although it will make our budget so tight. I know these decisions are made. Even our family's getting bigger. We need a bigger house. Just needs to happen. And see, what happens is this need that not is necessarily a need, it's more of a want, but we are able to kind of say, no, it's a need. And reality is it's kind of become greedy. Because if you look and compare to the rest of the world, as Americans, we have plenty. And the crazy part is, we are one of the most wealthiest countries that have ever existed, and we are also one of the most unhappy countries. So I wonder, has greed become masked as needs? See, Jesus talked about this. Look at this passage. Then he said, beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own. He was getting at it. And he was speaking to, I think, what us in this American culture struggle with. To where I get it, I've struggled with this myself. I see things as needs, and then if I take a step back and let God speak into my life, I start to recognize that may not be as much of a need as I think. And to me, sometimes it's perspective. What I think are needs and what other people think are needs, it's drastically different. And go back to this, if God owns everything, then I probably should be running all those decisions by him anyways. So here becomes the crux of the message. It's the question I want you to wrestle with. Do we master our money, or does our money master us? Because if you go the first route, if we master our money, that means we recognize that God owns it all. He's given us control of it, and so we want to master it. We want to be good stewards of it. We want it to produce in the way that God wants it to produce. Because it's just resources. You think about it, money, it's just paper. It can be used to have an impact. And that's how God owns it all, and he goes, I want you to use this and be in awe of what God can do with it. That's if we choose to master our money, and we tell our money where it should go. But the other side of it, or does our money master us, really speaks to the other side, to where we have debts, and we have stress, and we have all this confusion. Money is complicated. And so it feels like our money is mastering us because we're constantly being told where our money should go. So the life hack today, to make your finances simple, it simply comes down to this: how to master your money. How do we do it? Because I think all of us want that. I don't think any of us sign up for the stressed, debt-filled life. None of us do that. But the reality is a lot of us are in it. And so how do we master our money? There's a resource I want to put in front of you, because I think this book, I read it even as I was preparing for this. This book is great for just processing through that. And we will pull some things from the book, but here's the name of the book, Master Your Money. How convenient. And it's by Ron Blue. If you want to know his story, he was a successful businessman. He grew up, went to Wall Street, figured it all out, made a ton of money, but God started getting hold of his heart. And what he noticed is what he saw in culture and all those kind of things. He started to recognize, whoa, what God teaches in the Bible, the biblical principles that are there, they actually will help you navigate your money in the right way. And so I think it's very valuable. I mean, you got a guy who grew up in Wall Street, saw it all, and then his life has changed. God's got a hold of it, and he's recognizing what I learned in Wall Street. It's funny. Some of those principles play out in the Bible. And so one of the things that he mentioned that I think is critical for us to understand, he kind of gave this chart. Look at this. Because these are kind of the 5 areas that we're probably in some kind of capacity. Maybe all of us have been in a lot of them. But either we're at a struggling spot, and struggling being simply this: don't have enough money to pay the bills, can't be able to afford anything, money just isn't great, and I'm struggling to make ends meet. There's been times where we've been there. We've seen it happen. It's gone on. But then if you make the right decisions, put the right principles in your life, you might be able to move up to surviving, which pretty much surviving is simply this: we're able to cover our bills, but we are living paycheck to paycheck. It's tight. And I'll be honest, it's still a little stressful. Not as bad as struggling, but we're surviving. And then the next one is stable. This is where you start to go, you know what? We're starting to save some money. We're good. We're able to pay for things. We're able to afford things. We still have some debts that we're not happy about, but we are stable right now. The income is starting to really kind of come through for us. And then you got secure. This is where you're feeling good about, hey, we're starting to save for kids' college fund. The retirement is starting to look good. You're starting to feel very secure with where your money is at. Things are looking good. And if you were going to your accountant, the accountant would be like, things are looking really good for you. Things are really starting to settle in. But then this last one, and here's the deal. This is not everybody will get here, but it's a surplus. There are those who God is gifted with, just with the mindset and the ability to bring in a good amount of money. And so with that surplus, you have money at your disposal. And so one of the things I think that God kind of challenged people in this realm is going, what are you going to do with that surplus? Are you going to hoard it? Or are you going to do something miraculous with it? Because that's what God wants to do. Now, hear me. It's all about on this, figuring out, where are you? And once you kind of come to grips, okay, this is where I am, the reality is, and we'll explain this later, there are principles that play out to help you taking whatever the next step is. Same principles across all steps. And so we will walk through that. But here's what I've realized, though. I can give you all the steps in the world. I could give you Ron Blue's financial guru stuff. But I've looked at all the financial gurus, a lot of them. I've gone through Dave Ramsey. I've gone through Joe Sengle's stuff. And what I realized, it's very similar principles. And I feel like a lot of people in our world, they have the knowledge of what to do with their money. But the problem is not the knowledge. It's our emotions. Hear me. We will never be able to master our money if we can't master our emotions. You could have all the great principles in the world, but you will never be able to move up the blocks if you can't master your emotions. And so, to kind of help you understand, so how do I master our emotions? What are the things? There are about 4 different ones that I want to go through. Here's the first one. Be content. This one's hard because it's all about spending less money than you have and learning to be in those moments where you go, you know what, I'm just content with where I am at. I don't need that bigger house. I don't need that bigger car. I don't need these things. But this is not easy. And this is something I think you constantly have to bring before God and saying, God, am I content? Because I know for me, I wrestled with this recently. We have 3 kids, and our youngest is a year and a half now. And so what I recognized is that when the 3rd kid came in to our lives, we've now got a family of 5. I'm looking at this going, and the house that we had, I remember when we first bought it, I was like, man, this house is great. This house is perfect. We'll be in here for so long. As soon as we had our 3rd kid, 5 of us, I'm going, this house is too small. We need a bigger house. And Tina and I both are just feeling like, man, we need this bigger house. I remind you, there was plenty of space. For what we needed plenty of space. But I could just see this, I'm not content. And I'm glad I kind of sat on this and I talked to God about it, because the reality is, God was telling us, you don't need a bigger house. You just need to be content with what you have. And he was right. The house we have is great. And learning to be content in that is, because I could have rushed in. Yeah, could we afford a bigger house? Sure. But then the payments would have been tighter. Things would have created more stress, more debt, all those things that pile in. And so emotionally, I had to step back and go, as much as I want that, I don't need it. I need to be content. So that's a tough emotion to battle, but it's critical. The other one is this. You got to delay gratification. For me on this one, when I've had a rough day or I'm just like, something went really well, like the emotions are high, this one's hard for me. Had a rough day, I'm like, man, let's go out to eat. I don't even want to think about dinner. I just want to go have someone do it for me. And that's not always the best decision. Even if I've done something great and want to celebrate and go spend all this money, like, oh, we did this, so let's spend this, let's do this. And sometimes it's better you stick to the plan you have and delay the gratification. And recognize, nope, I shouldn't spend there, because if I do, I'm going to regret it, and I just need to delay it, because over time, if I stick to this plan, if I delay gratification, because I know I want this right now, but if I delay it, it will be better. Guarantee it. The third part is this: be a joyful giver. I think most of us try to. I think most of us shoot for that, because no one's usually excited to go, I guess I'll give you this. You know, that kind of deal. But there are moments, I'm not going to lie, as a pastor, I look at my taxes and I'm like, we gave how much? Whew. But then I feel like God combats that and go, but do you realize what's happened? Families you've helped, people that you've been a part of, all because you recognize that I own this and I was able to use this. I stretched this dollar far more than you could. And it puts me back in my spot of being content and delaying the gratification, but also recognizing there's joy in that God's got this. And God's going to make this go a lot farther than I can. And the last part of this is, I think, also very important, peace in the midst of economic uncertainty. Reality is, this will happen all the time. I mean, you think about it, we've had it in our time here. 2008 was a crash. It's just those things happen. There's always going to be uncertainty. There's no way to guarantee that your retirement will play out. There's no way to guarantee that your savings will go the way you want to. There's no way, because we don't own it. But you know who does? God does. And what brings us peace is that he's a sovereign God, and he is a God that provides. He will be with us throughout all of this. He will take care of us. And emotionally, the hard part sometimes is this. This does not necessarily go the way we want it to. When life circumstances, we are in a bind, we're going, I don't want this, this is not what I want, we really have to stick to these emotions, being like, but stay content. Delay the gratifications, be joyful, and remember there is peace, that God is our sustainer. If we emotionally walk through that, I guarantee you will start to see an ability to practice the principles that God gives us. Because now, you may be going, okay, I get it. I'm going to walk through some of these emotions. I'm going to walk through now. Here are some of the steps. Here are the principles. Here is the knowledge you need to know. But we first got to wrestle through this, and now we're going to dig into the knowledge. So here you go. Here are the 5 biblical principles that come from Master Your Money by Rod and Blue. First one is this. It's very simple. All of these are actually pretty simple. Spend less than you earn. Crazy thought, I know. Avoid unnecessary debt. I said there is some necessary debt, but too often we are taking on way too much debt that's not necessary. And then build margins, save, set long-term goals, and give generously. So those are kind of your 5 biblical principles here. Now, for me, I like to have it in a plan. I like to kind of go, all right, how does this work? How does this play out? Because all those principles are great, but what does that look like with my money? How do I simplify it? So here's kind of how I took another plan that I heard a long time ago. My parents taught it to me. It's called the 10-10-80 plan. Simply this, you put 10% towards giving, 10% towards saving, and 80% towards your lifestyle. So you think about that, the 5 biblical principles we talked about. So if you do the 10% giving, you're going to be giving generously. If you do the 10% of saving, you will build margin, and you'll be able to set long-term goals. If you do the 80% of lifestyle, you'll spend. You'll have to learn to spend less than you earn, because you're not spending 100%. You're spending only 80%. I know, it's math. And then you will avoid unnecessary debt, because you're going, I only have 80% to spend of my money. The rest of it, this other 20%, has got to go towards this. So to help us with this, I want you to think about Skittles. I know that sounds so random, but just go with me on this. I want you to think about, especially as parents, or maybe you're a teenager or a kid, I want you to think about that time, or maybe you went to the movie, or you went to the ballpark, or whatever, and your parents got you something. You didn't have to spend your money for it. It was given to you. And so I like to think of that now, because I've got kids and I'm walking through it. There's days where I provide so many meals for them and they're like, I hate this dinner. And I'm like, shut your mouth, because I provided it for you. And so sometimes our kids complain about this, but one of the most biggest moments you'll find this is sometimes you go to a movie and you buy them candy and then you start reaching for it, or you say, hey, I want one, especially with Skittles. They're delicious. And your kid kind of goes, no, these are mine. Isn't it fascinating? Our kids can teach us sometimes the mentality that we have. And so I wanted to take these Skittles and represent, okay, these Skittles, they are something that was given to us. They're not ours. We don't own them. Someone bought them for us. And all they asked in return was saying, hey, I want you to steward this well. I want to make sure that you use these to the best of your abilities. Because remember, like, this analogy can play out. God has given us all this. God gave us Skittles. If you want to talk, Skittles represent your resources, your money. And so here's what I want us to start thinking, is we take these Skittles and we start dividing it out. So I did some math on this. There is actually 60 Skittles in a bag of Skittles right here. So that would mean, if you're going to follow the 10-10-80 plan, that would mean you'd put 6 into savings. You'd put 6 into giving. And then you would put the rest all in lifestyle. So you see the 10-10-80 plan. You've got 6 here for giving, 6 here for saving, and you've got your lifestyle. So let's talk about your lifestyle a little bit. So let's go back to that. It's all about spend less than you earn and avoid unnecessary debt. Did you know this? God spoke to this. He gave us some great wisdom into this. Look at what Proverbs says. The wise have wealth and luxury, but fools spend whatever they get. And look at this next one in Romans. Owe nothing to anyone except for your obligation to love one another. What if we started looking at our lifestyle a little bit differently? And started saying, we're going to be strategic with this. This is what I have to live on. I'm going to focus on 80%. And that may mean I can't just go buy everything right now. I'll have to learn to be content. I'll have to learn to delay gratification. So that way, I can learn to go, this is my 80%, and I'm going to make do with this. There was a story in Ron Blue's book where he met with a pastor. And this was a while ago, but he made, on average, $8,000 a year. And this was a time where that wasn't a crazy amount of money, but it was something. And so $8,000 a year, I'm going, how did that guy survive? And so he's now up into being 80 years old. And Ron Blue's talking to him, he's like, okay, well, what resources do you have? Trying to help navigate how he could help this couple. Because the reality is he's 80 years old and his wife is now needing nursing home care. And so this guy walked through just how he was so diligent with his lifestyle stuff to where he focused very hard. He's like, there's a lot of things I couldn't afford. He worked hard to where he paid for his house on his own. And he did all of this, and he had 6-figure savings. He did all this simply because he followed this plan and really stuck to the lifestyle of saying, I can't have it all, but what I do have is great. And he managed it well and was able to impact so many people. And so to me, this lifestyle part is critical. We may need to learn to live well below our means. I know for Tina and I, when we were first married, we had to realize that because we had a ton of student debt and we had some housing debt. We wanted to start buying a house. And so one of the things that we kind of made a decision on is like, those are our necessary debts right now, but really no more after that. And so we had to save up. Man, we still have some of just 10-year-old cars because we want to live below our means. We don't want to take on this extra debt that we would take on if we bought newer cars. And the crazy part is we stuck to this crazy plan and we were like, okay, this is going to be our lifestyle money. This is going to be this. And we were able to pay off our student loans relatively quickly in about 4 or 5 years, which then created more room, more freedom in this. And because we made this decision to live well below our means, we've been able to knock out debt, and now our focus is knocking out our house debt. And that's what I want for everybody, where you learn within your lifestyle, you're going, I've got to cut back because it will be worth it in the end. But then let's talk about the other one, savings. This one's hard, because this one usually is the first one to go when lifestyle seems to be taking up all 100%. And the reality is you need margin in your life. You need money for that rainy day. When that accident happens or when the furnace goes out, you've got to have margin in your life to be able to afford things and be able to take care of things. And on top of that, setting long-term goals, it's rewarding when over time you've saved and then you've been able to go, I paid for this in full. I covered this. I know for Tina and I, one of the big things that we experienced, and it was a huge day for us, is being able to, we had our old cars at the beginning of marriage, and then we saved up enough to afford a newer car, and we were like, and we paid for it in full. No debts in that. And it's funny when you do that because you kind of throw all the bankers off there, like, you want to do what? Yes, we're ready for this. But look at what Proverbs says. Good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty. There is no quick way to build savings. This is kind of one of those, if you want to really build wealth, you build it slowly. And I've seen that in my life, and I recognize anybody who's kind of been able to build some wealth, you see that. It's a slow process. And one of the key pieces to that is having a budget and setting goals. I do this all the time with premarital couples and being like, hey, finances is usually the one spot that everyone fights. Because you kind of are on different wavelengths on this. And I go, if you can get on the same page and start going, you know what? Let's start setting a budget. Let's start setting some long-term goal on this. You go on this journey as a couple and you learn that we can combat this together. And one of the critical pieces that you need to understand, it's not all about just getting a budget and having goals. It's the process of it. It's letting God be included in that. Because look at this. Seeking and implementing God's wisdom for our budget and goal is the key to being a good steward. I think God is the only one that can truly direct you in being able to go, God, how do you want me to spend our money? How do you want me to spend it? How do you want me to save it? How do you want me to give it? He wants to lead you in that. And so recognize it's a process, because I guarantee you the first time you do your budget, you'll do it wrong. You'll miss something. You'll forget something. And so recognize that. And recognize it's this process that you're going on, learning how to save and set a budget and plan for the future. The last one is this: give and give generously. Here's what the Bible says about it. You are under a curse, for your whole nation has been cheating me. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse, so there will be enough food in my temple. If you do, says the Lord of heaven's army, I will open the windows of heaven for you. I will pour out a blessing so great you won't have enough room to take it in. Try it. Put me to the test. See, with this one, this is the one that probably makes the least sense to us. Because we're going, God, you want us to steward it. Why do you need our money back? This doesn't make sense. God, you own it all. You don't need our money. But I think God simply does this simply out of relationship. I do the same thing with my kids. If I give them something, I want them to make sure and understand, hey, this is where this comes from. And I want them to be grateful. Right now we're working on that in our 5-year-old. Every time she gets something, it's like, no, I want this or I want that. And I'm like, just be grateful for what you have. And see, God is teaching all of us this to where we trust him, that he will take care and the 80% will be enough and the 10% we're saving is important. And what this does is it breaks the greed. Because if you look back at this verse, the problem with what was going on in Israel at this time is because they were pretty much taking this and putting it into wherever they wanted it. They stopped being generous towards each other. They stopped being generous towards God. Generosity was lost. And they started cheating on each other, as in cheating people out of money, cheating God out of money. And God started recognizing, if you're not being generous, if you're not giving, then the temptation of greed creeps in like crazy, and it will start to take over. And you won't even recognize it. That's why God, this is the one time he says, test me in this, because he doesn't want us to be greedy. He wants us to recognize how being generous is important. And if you think, oh, that's just Old Testament, look at what Jesus said. I take you back to this verse. Here's the lesson. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. Then when your possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. Jesus goes, hey, God, the Old Testament talks about 10%, but here's the reality. Use it all. Give it all away. So that way at the end of your life, you go, God, everything you gave me, you allowed me to steward, I used to show you who you are and show people who you are. So here's some final thoughts. When we give, what it does is it breaks the stronghold of money. It breaks greed. And that's why it's so important to keep this balance where we're giving, we're saving, and we've got our lifestyle. The other one is this: giving generously has nothing to do with income. It has everything to do with the heart. And so recognize that this is what God cares about. He goes, the way I want you to finance your money, I go back, it's all about a relationship. I want you to learn to trust me. I want you to learn to see I value you and I trust you to manage this. And so will you learn to master your emotions and then learn to put in the biblical principles that I think will lead you to a life that's full of freedom, full of things being simple and peace, instead of the complicated part with money where it seems to produce stress and produce just these difficult things. I know for me, one of the things that I am so thankful for as I look at Tina and I and what we've navigated with our finances, I'm so thankful for the people who have poured into us. Some of it, listening to the financial gurus and what they've studied, I'm thankful for that. My parents, everybody who's just spoken into how we should do finances. But the best part is God is right there saying, I want to help too. I want to lead you in this. Think about the creator of the universe wants to connect with you about how to lead your finances and do it in a way where it will be fulfilling. So I hope that you'll be willing to take the steps. I hope you'll be willing to start mastering your emotions, because I simply want you to be able to answer this question in a powerful way. Are you a master of your money? Is that how God sees you? That's a big question to wrestle with. And I hope that we will take some steps out of this and start working on that. Let's pray.
I have no idea what the time is. I know. We're like 40 minutes in. 40 minutes? It felt long, and I can trim it up, but okay. I was like, shoot, I'm just going to keep going because I think it's okay? Yeah. Okay. That was great. Thanks. You can take next week off, and we'll just play that video everywhere. Do you feel like God owning everything I repeated too much? Because I felt I did. Or is that just critical for people like, keep hearing it, keep hearing it?